The goal of this video is to help you code some vectors in glowscript. I'm going to start with the screen share. And so while my computer's getting fired up here, go to glowscript.org. I need to hit a pause on something over here. Just a second. So, excuse me. So once you go to glowscript.org, you need a Google ID. I'm just going to sign in. In the upper right corner, there's a button that says sign in. And I'm going to just sign in here. And so hopefully you see something that looks like this. And now I'm going to expand this window. All right. So there we go. So we don't really need the upper right corner of the screen much anymore. Now in the middle of the screen, there's the word here. You can click on that link and that takes you to your programs. First thing, check whether it says public or private. If you change it to private, and then you try to share a code with me, I can't look at it. So that could make it problematic to help you out later. So make sure it says public up there, and then I'm going to hit create a new program. And it turns out a trick here is if you use the period symbol, that allows you to split up your words. So if you want to use the dot or the period to separate words in your code titles, that's convenient. So let's say this is the code of a lifetime. At the top, you'll see this glowscript 3.0 v Python. Do not get rid of that. All right. Do not add a second copy of that. Don't change that at all. That header helps these programs run. So if you ever see me give you a snippet of code, you have to make sure this header's there and any additional code goes below that. And you don't want to type that twice. All right. So great. Let's start off with some simple stuff here. Let's say A is the number 6, B equals 7, and let's say C is equal to A times B. All right. Something cool that we might want to do, if we run this program, nothing's going to happen. If I run it, I'll just show you. Nothing happens. What? Great. So you have to remember to tell the computer to print. We could say this. I'm going to do a print statement like this. And actually, let's do it like this. Anything in quotes will print exactly as you see it. Now, I'm going to put C in here like this. So the idea is this will print out the characters A plus B equals. And you could use either single quotes or double quotes as long as you use the same on both ends. Now, this plus means add to it the value of C. So if I run this program, let's see what that prints out. So notice it doesn't print a plus symbol after the equal sign. This A plus B equals was the string, and this was the number C. Now, let's say we want to make vectors. Vectors might be, let's say this is 3 in the X, 0 in the Y, and 0 in the Z. Okay, so this is, you could write out the full word vector, or you could just write vec to save space. So this is 3 in the X direction, 0 in the Y direction, 0 in the Z. And let's say B is another vector. Let's say it's 0 in the X, 4 in the Y, and 0 in the Z. Now, notice here, something you want to do is try to be consistent with your spacing throughout all of your codes. Like, for example, here, I'm using a space between the variable and the equal sign just to make it a little bit easier for me to read. If you want to do that without these, that's fine, but you don't want to start mixing notation. So try to pick a style and get used to it and be consistent. Now, it doesn't know how to do A star B because that's doesn't make sense. So let's say this is A plus B. Check this out. Python will go into the code and say, look, A is a vector and B is a vector. I can add those two because they're both vectors, and that means C will be a vector. And so now when I run this code, let's see what this looks like. Notice A plus B, that's still the same string, but this is a vector, 3, 4, 0. Now, it turns out, maybe we just want to write, all right, and maybe I'll do this. And then what we could do, just so these print statements look a little bit more reasonable, notice I'm putting some space in the code. It would make sense to maybe do it like this. Sorry, I'm taking just a second here. And the idea here is now your captions make sense. And in fact, you could even do this. And notice, whoops. When I run this, let's see how this works out. Ah, too many parentheses. Whoops. There we go. You probably caught that as I was typing. So notice you could actually add text before and after the values. And notice it gives, so we want to be organized with our print statements if we're outputting things. So this is the most basic thing you could do. And notice this is kind of convenient because what if we make this one a little bit trickier? And let's say this one's negative 8.9. When you run this one, now we could type in the vector components and we could quickly get any answer we want. Furthermore, we could do this one. The magnitude of vector C is, check this out. I tell the computer to compute the magnitude. So I'm just putting some spaces in here so I can see things a little better. Try to stay consistent with my plan from earlier. All right. So in general, you want to try and stay consistent as well. So when I run this one, this function says first get the magnitude, then print it. And already we could see this is hugely useful if it would actually run. And this is not running right now. I don't know what's going on here. Having some trouble. This happened in the last video too. Jeez, what the hell? I don't understand. Let's just go out of here. Let's try running it now. There we go. Whew. All right. I don't know what that was, but let's keep going. It's been a long morning already, and it's only 8:03 a.m. All right, let's keep going. All right, so now I don't know what happened there. It hung up, but so this is going to happen to you sometimes. Some things, maybe this is getting out of control, and I don't want to do all this. So maybe I want to comment out some of this information. I want to select some pieces of the code that I don't want it to execute. I'm going to hit Control/. This is the slash under the question mark. All right. And so when I hit this, watch what happens. These two have the hashtag in front of it. When I run it, notice it doesn't execute those lines of code. This could be very useful when you're troubleshooting. glowscript doesn't have a great debugger, so you have to just kind of comment out different lines of code and run it and see where the mistake is happening. So for example, watch this. What if I comment out this first line of code? It gives me an error message and it says A is something that's not defined, so you can go in there and look for it. Now, to be clear, notice it says at or near line 5. Sometimes the mistake could come many lines of code before, many lines of after, but usually it's somewhere around here. So when we look at line 5, it's first referring to A. It doesn't know what A is because it was commented out. So now when I run it, it should work again. So that's what we've got to check for bugs. One of the things you're going to want to do when you're making your code is run it every few lines. Obviously, if you're a more experienced coder, you could get a better IDE with a debugger, and that's a different story. I'll talk about that one-on-one later. Anyways, all right, so let's get back to our original vector here and just be able to check this to make sure this is working. So clearly, and I'll go ahead and comment these back in. All right, so when we run this one, this should be a 3, 4, 5 right triangle just to show you this is working. Notice the magnitude of C is 5. What if I want a unit vector? Okay. Whoops. Let's spell. Oh, okay. The unit vector, I'll call this C hat, is, take a guess, hat. And when you run this one, notice it spits out a unit vector for you. I hope you can see this will be very useful. What if you wanted to do a dot product? So just so you can see the dot product, give me just a second here. The help file up in the right corner of the screen, if you go to there, you can click here. Let's say you want to work with all these different things. That's cool. And so somewhere in here, there's math functions. Now, this is one way to search the help file. Another way to search the help file is just to say, go to Google and type glowscript. Whoops. And let's say I want to do the dot product. So it says go to here. And so sometimes and now I'm going to get this back to full screen here. But the idea is it shows me all the different vector commands. Notice there's all kinds of different commands. It looks like we could have used norm to get the hat vector, right? So look, if I want to get a dot product, this is one way to do it. Here's another way to do it. So let's go back into our code and let's do this. How about vector D? So D is going to be a new quantity. Sorry, not vector D. I want V to equal A. How about I just do it like this, dot of A comma B. Now think about this. If this one is 3, 0, 0, and this one's 0, 4, 0, the dot product, you multiply the X components, then you multiply the Y components, then you multiply the Z components. So everything is going to be 0. Then you add those multiplications up. So D should be an answer of 0. Oh, I forgot to print it, right? So if you don't print it, there we go. And let's just kind of keep our convention. You do whatever you want with your convention. Now, a lot of this, I don't really want to see all this right now, so I'm going to comment that out. I'm just looking at the dot product right now. So when I run this one, there we go. The dot product is 0. Oh, whoops, I misspelled it. Who cares? And then, so what if you want to do the cross product? Well, I would guess you type cross, but I don't know. Let's find out. You could use the help file. Oh, whoops. If I change that, I should change this, right? So these are the things that are going to happen when you're coding. You'll cut and paste and you'll know what you're doing, but you'll forget to change a statement or cut and paste something and forget to correct it, and you'll run into all kinds of trouble. And so there we go. Now, this is great, but we would like to visualize these things, right? So watch this. Let's say I say A arrow equals an arrow. And one of the things that we want to do is we could say this arrow has a position. Okay. So POS, you're going to hear me say pause. I mean position, not pause as in pause the music. So there's going to be a position. And let's just set this one. We need a vector, and it's 0, 0, 0. And then we're going to say axis equals A. All right. And for now, let's stick in a color equals, I'm going to do color vectors here. So this would be 1, 0, 0. That's, let me get my parents. So the idea here is I've done an arrow, right? I'm going to get this out of here. So that just says create an arrow. And then I put all this junk inside of that. This tells me where the tail is located. This tells me the axis from the tail to the tip. So this will be a vector that goes in the direction of A and has the same magnitude as A. So it's basically drawing vector A for us. And this simply sets the color. The first number is how much red, 0 to 1 means 1 means 100% red on. This is how much RGB. So this is green and this is blue. So if I did some red and some green, think to yourself what color should be output on the screen. And so when I draw this one, let's see. Yellow, red plus green equals yellow. Great. Now you could label that. I'm not going to worry about labels right now. You could search how to label these and that's fine. But what I want to do is, now that I've got one of these arrows, I'm going to make a second arrow. So I just copied that. Right. And so this one, let's go ahead and put it at the same spot, but let's give it a different color. So how about green plus blue? Let's see what color this turns out. So when I run this one, I now see two arrows on the screen. All right. Now, here's something cool. Let's go back. Let's forget about this cross product for a minute. And let's go back to this one. Okay. Let's say we want to get vector C printed. What would be the logical spot to draw it? Well, let's think. When we're doing vectors, and I'm going to change the color of this one just so this shows up. Hold on. We're going to do a red vector for A now. So the idea here is A is drawn right here. So this is vector A. And I'm going to assume that right here is the origin. We put the tail of A right at the origin. Now, if you want to add vectors using the graphical vector addition, we want to go tail to tip, tail to tip. So we want to put B over here, right? How do we do that in the code? Well, in the code, what we could do is we could change the position of the B arrow. And we want the position of the B arrow to be at this location. Well, how do I get to that location? That is A's position. So this is A dot pause. And then this is A dot axis. And so what I can do is I can change the position of B to the following. And let me get an eraser and clean this up. This is what's so cool about this, I think. So what I'm going to do is I want to say this is at A dot pause plus A dot axis. All right. And so just to put some space in there so you can see that a little bit better. All right. Now let's just do this. What this does is it says, it goes out and it says, what is this thing? Right. Well, that was a vector. And then I'm going to add to it this thing. Well, A was also a vector. So that means this is a vector, which means Python will understand that this position is also a vector. When I run this one, did I forget let's see what I forgot here. All right. Oh, do you see what it is? This has got to be a arrow. So this is actually a good mistake. So notice there's a difference between A and a arrow. A arrow has a property of a position. And I should have noticed that when it didn't light up like this. So notice over here, it says go into the A arrow and get the axis. So now let's see if this runs. Notice A was a vector. There is no such thing as A dot pause, right? There is no such thing as A dot pause. Let me hit Control Z to undo that. So Control Z will be the undo button for us. Now when I run this one, hopefully it works. Sorry about that. And so hopefully this looks pretty cool. And so now maybe I want to copy this one. And let's say we want to make the C arrow, right? That would be an arrow. And now when we're doing this one, C is supposed to be A plus B. So I'm going to give this a different color. Let's make this one green. You can play around with the colors and learn on your own. But the idea is when you're doing vector addition, we want to go from the first tail to the last tip. And let's see if this vector addition is working. So I'm going to run this program. And there we go. We see that this is actually working. And you could do all kinds of stuff with this from here on out, but this at least gets you rolling. And I hope you see the benefits of doing this. What if we wanted to make this a little bit more complicated? You could add in another vector. You could put in the positions, and hopefully that's what you will be doing with your first code. For now, I'm going to stop this. The next video we'll talk